just the camera.
Is that better?
Karen, it's only for the video equipment.
Oh, it's only for the video?
Yeah, only for the video.
Okay, I'll just have to talk loud. So, good. Don't tell where it is, but did anybody spot the lizard? We know where it is.
So have we
Did you
done
know where it is?
videotaping
That's
somebody
super fun
using the microphone?
Is it
coming in here? No. I mean the in-house microphone.
Oh, I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
A little bit about me. I'm a Bear County Master Gardener. I've been a Master Gardener for, I actually don't know how many years. It's been quite a while. I'm selling today for Grace Emery, who is like really, really wonderful about her, because she's actually at the specialist training. So right now, today and the next couple of days, there's an herb specialist training going on. And that's where she is. So what you ought to do is invite her back like in another 6 months and get another perspective on herbs. But we're going to talk about herbs today. I love growing herbs. I love growing vegetables. I've been married for 40 years now, and I've had a garden every year since we've been married, except for 1 year. And that was when we moved here and I had a 4-week-old baby. And that summer I didn't grow a garden, but I started gardening again as soon as I could. So I've been gardening for a long time. And I've never really thought of myself as like an herb expert. And then I got to thinking about it. I've been giving the herb presentation for a little while now. I've always grown herbs. You know, it's just something I do. And in fact, I was teaching a veggie class a while back. We were talking about the cost of growing vegetables. And the topic came up, is it worth it monetarily to grow your own vegetables? And there are people that say, you can go to the grocery store and buy potatoes and carrots and stuff, and you can buy them fairly inexpensively. So why would you spend time and effort growing your own? And so we had this discussion, and I was talking about winter gardening, and I saved more money with my winter gardening. I like sugar snap peas. They're really expensive in the grocery store, and you can grow them. They taste wonderful. I don't even buy the grocery store ones anymore because they just don't taste right. But we had this discussion, and somebody in the audience pointed out, well, you grow herbs, don't you? And I said, well, yeah, but they're just kind of, everywhere. And just, And they said, but do you know how much herbs cost in the store? And I'm like, oh, no, I never buy them. They said this little teeny tiny bunch can cost like $3. And I was like, well, okay, I need to factor the herbs into my cost. Am I saving money with my garden? So anyways, it's not working. Do I need to turn it on?
Yeah.
I'll just do it this way for now. Or not, I guess. I broke it already. No. Well, we'll chat a little bit while we're dealing with our technical difficulties. Growing herbs, it's like I said, it's cost effective. There are so many, and they're so versatile. So I love growing herbs because I can grow them in my landscape. I love having recommended varieties, maybe a few, but just we'll go over a whole bunch of different herbs at the end. You should have a couple of handouts. I'm not really following those handouts. Those are just for your edification and for further reading. One other thing, did everybody get a QR code? We'll take care of another item of business. There are little QR codes, little pieces of paper. Does somebody close by have one? One of these things. So grab one of these things. You just scan it in with your phone, and it links to a document that I made. And the document just has all sorts of useful information. Most of it is about vegetable gardening. And there are links about when to plant what, for your fall garden, when to plant what for your spring garden, how to get a garden going. It says in San Antonio, but it applies here as well. And then there are a few links about growing herbs. So get your QR code before you leave. If you have trouble doing it, then at the end just come tell me, I'm having trouble making this work, and we'll see if we can figure it out. Okay, so that's the business. Now we'll go on. So herbs, the useful plants. And they're useful for so many things. Flavor, fragrance, medicinal qualities. The thing that I use them for in my garden, even more than anything, is to invite pollinators in. I love having the bees come. I've had people tell me, I'm growing squash, I'm growing zucchini, and I grow this big plant and I have blossoms, but I never get fruit. Or I get a female blossom and it never becomes fruit. And I say, well, do you see bees in your garden? And they're like, no, I don't have any bees anymore in my garden. The herbs will help bring the pollinators in. And I'll have some pictures later on in the slideshow that will show kind of how I use some of the herbs in my garden to invite the pollinators in. The medicinal qualities, I'm not an expert in that, so I don't really talk a whole lot about that. I'm not a naturopath. I don't feel like I'm qualified really to tell you what to do medicinally with your herbs. I have a sister-in-law who's really into that. She makes tinctures and she, says, oh, our family uses this and that. And that's all. I want to get more educated about that, but I'm not yet educated about that. So we won't really talk a whole lot about that. What's the difference between herbs and spices? Who can tell me? You can read it. That's good. Herb is the fresh part, and the spice is the dry part, the seed. So if you want to think about, let's talk about coriander and cilantro. Same plant, but we call it cilantro when we're eating the leaf, and we call it coriander when we're eating the seed. And if you like Indian food, you're going to be eating that ground up seed a lot, because it's usually one of the ingredients for curry powder. And it's in a lot of the Indian dishes. In England, they just call it coriander, don't differentiate. But I kind of like, the flavor is very different when you're eating the leaf as opposed to the seed. Other examples, I grow ginger and turmeric in my yard. And would you really technically consider that an herb? I don't know, but you use the root, dried and ground up, or even fresh, kind of like you would an herb, more for a flavoring kind of thing. So I think of herbs more for something that enhances the flavor of your dish. Your herb is not going to be your main course. It's not going to be, you add it to the potatoes, or you add it to the tomatoes. It's used in smaller amounts. And they're so yummy. It's like, I don't like bland food. I love to put spices and herbs in pretty much everything. Real quick, where to grow them. You can have a dedicated herb bed, and I have sections of my garden right now. I have a dedicated herb bed, and it's a mishmash. It's not pretty. It's out in the garden, and it's just like everything thrown in this bed. I've just been throwing herbs in there. And they all just grow mishmash together. Did you have a question?
Yeah, can you put the screen back to build the screen, the slide full screen? There we go.
Was that?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
Can you still navigate?
Yeah, I can still navigate. There should be a way.
That's good, that's good.
Do you get full screen?
Yes, thank you. That's wonderful. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, there we go. Okey dokey. Thank you for pointing that out. I can't tell these things from where I am. There's a big glare on this, so I can't see it at all. And there's a pretty big glare on that one too. So if there's a problem, let me know, okay? Dedicated herb bed. I usually grow most of my herbs intermingled with my veggies. And I usually grow some out in my front yard too. I have barrels. I have, you know that bed by the street? Some people call it the hell strip, where you can't get anything to grow. I finally got something to grow. Blackfoot daisies. I had been trying for years. And I got Blackfoot daisies to grow in there. And then Google Fiber came along. And they dug up my bed to put their fiber cable to make it go, to the neighborhood. And then I replanted them. As they were out there, I was saving my daisies, and I put them in little trays with water, and I replanted them. And then a week later, they came back. Oh, we need to do this again. They dug them all up again. And I saved them one more time. And then they came and they put the line in the ground there. And I tried to save them, and I went out and talked to them. They had 25 feet of fiber optic cable because they had measured wrong. They had wound it up and they had stuck it in my bed there. And I said, I give up. I'm not going to try it. So I put whiskey barrels out there. And I've been growing things in my whiskey barrels because they're pretty. You can grow the rosemary, you can grow the prostate kind, or you can grow the upright kind. And I've had thyme and I've had oregano and kind of draping over the edge of the barrels and stuff. And it was kind of fun. Last spring, there were a couple of teenage girls walking a dog. And they came by my house. And you don't think about teenage girls really being interested in plants and whatever. But they were walking, and they're like, what is that? Is that kale there? Is that parsley? Is that? And they actually knew some of the plants. So it's like, good job, girls. And they said, we love going by here to see what you're going to be planting in these barrels. And so that's been kind of fun. So they can be ornamental and it can be a point of interest. And I told my neighbors, I had cilantro in there one time. I said, grab some as you walk by, just help yourself because it just grows like crazy. So it's pretty in the landscape as well. And it's good. It's great for containers. Herbs are wonderful for containers. So if you're growing in a small space, they're really, really great for containers. Herbs come in different types. You have a few annuals, and basil is a really good example of that. How many of you grow basil? If you're not growing basil, start. It's the easiest thing in the world to grow. And it will make seed, and they'll drop the seed, and you'll get basil every year for the rest of your life. Even in this drought condition, I have basil everywhere right now. And I have basil that's growing that I have not watered. It's giving me the life for your life. But it's still alive, and I've left it in place, but I'm curious. We're supposed to get rain this weekend. I'm hoping. And I just left it. I'm curious what's going to happen. If it gets some rain, will it take off again? And I'm thinking it probably will. The only thing about basil is it doesn't like the cold, so it's going to be gone. So it's a definite annual. It's here. It's going to do its life cycle. It's going to bloom. It's going to be strong. I don't really know of a lot of biennialers, but I have a lot of perennials. The rosemary goes forever. I had oregano and thyme that have been there forever and ever and ever. And they just keep plugging away. You just kind of have to prune them back every now and then, especially the oregano and thyme. They seem to be happier with occasional pruning. Getting started, direct seeding works really well. Sometimes they just do it for you. My basil and my cilantro, they just do it for me. Years ago, I bought a bottle of coriander seed at the grocery store. And I just tossed it in this little area of my garden. is. And then I put soil in there. If you want to know about seed starting, I love talking about seed starting. So I actually start with a sterile soil mix. I actually bake it. I want it sterile. I don't want germs in there. I clean my containers. And I put the soil in there. And then I just sprinkle the seeds on top. Especially if they're small, like basil or oregano, thyme. They're very teeny tiny. You don't even have to cover them up. Just get your soil moist, sprinkle them on top, shut the lid to the container, keep them somewhere warm for a few days, and they'll sprout. And you'll have probably, even if you're using seed that you thought wasn't very good, chances are you'll have a whole bunch of them. And when they get their first set of true leaves, or maybe their second set, then you can pinch them all out and plant them. And you'll have a whole bunch of little plants. So this picture here, somebody that, I didn't do this isn't my picture, but see all those little babies? When they get a little bit bigger, you can just gently separate them and put them in pots and have a whole bunch of herbs. Herbs are really good about starting from seed. You can also buy starts, and you can also do cuttings. Rosemary works really well for that, and oregano works really well. Thyme. With oregano and thyme, you can do layering. So just get a little branch, and it does it on its own. It does it on its own. Where the branches touch the soil, they'll just root. And then after a while, you can just cut them from the mother plant. You can dig them up, you can pot them up and move them elsewhere. They do really, really well that way. Saving seed. Sometimes I save seed. I save a lot of cilantro seed, particularly, and then I share it with people. And we talk about when you're supposed to plant that. Just let it dry out. You can let it dry out on the plant, but get it before the wind comes along and chases it all away. I just like to get a paper bag and round it in the paper bag and drop the seeds in. And there I have my seeds if I want to save them for next year. A lot of them I just let drop. And then store in an airtight container. A lot of people ask, do you have to refrigerate them? Do you have to? No, just they keep them away from the things that would make them germinate. So what causes seeds to germinate? Moisture and heat. And some seeds need light. Most seeds don't even need light. They need the light as soon as they start sprouting. But they don't always need the light just to start the process. So just keep the things away from them that would make them sprout, and you'll have viable seeds. Cuttings and divisions. I already kind of talked about the divisions. Cuttings you can take, just cut, put some rooting hormone, stick them in some sterile soil, and they're pretty easy to root. Herb care. There's not a whole lot of difference between herb care and vegetable care. I think herbs are even easier, quite frankly. Herbs they're just easy to grow. They don't have a whole lot of pests. They're just happy. Herbs are easy to grow. Add some compost annually. That's just always a good idea all over your landscape. Adding compost regularly. Apply a balanced fertilizer. Test your soil is the best option. I always tell people that, but I don't always practice what I preach. I have a very large garden and I have a whole bunch of raised beds. And so testing the soil, if I really wanted to do a good job, I really should test each bed, and that would just be very costly. So I don't test. I know that I have alkaline soil because of where I live. It's just alkaline. That's just how it is. And so I kind of watch my plants. Herbs don't seem to need a whole lot of fertilizer. They're slower growers. They're not like tomatoes where you have this little bitty tiny seed. And 3 months later, you have this massive plant with lots of tomatoes. That's going to need more fertilizer than your average herb. It's just kind of growing slowly and doing its thing and not producing a fruit. But you still want to have some nutrients in your soil. So watch that. It says water weekly, approximately 1 inch per week. Look at your plants. Watering weekly, would that work right now? That would not have worked this past of August, beginning of September. There were things that died while I was gone. Even though somebody was watering. But my herbs didn't die. So I know they got neglected at very hot, dry times, and they're still fine. Maybe they could look a little bit happier, but they're still fine. Mulch preserves water and nutrients. It prevents soil compaction. It invites the worms. It modulates the soil temperature so your worms can come up further into the soil. I love mulch. There are some things that don't work quite as well with mulch. If you're growing oregano and thyme, and you want it to be spreading and setting new roots so that you can have babies, it doesn't do that as well in mulch. So if you're trying to do that, you want the stems to be in contact with the soil. That's the one example where mulch isn't quite as nice in the herb garden. It does suppress weeds really, really well. I regularly get chip drops on my driveway. And I get my exercise. I get a lot of steps on the times that I get the chip drops. If you don't know what that is, you can call arborists and they'll dump the stuff that they have chipped that ground up, shredded, whatever you want to call it. They'll come and they'll dump like 5 to 8 yards on your driveway. And then you get to spend the next 2 or 3 days with a wheelbarrow, and it's really good exercise. But I have it all over my garden, and then after it breaks down, I can incorporate it into the soil. It works really well. Pests. There really aren't a whole lot of pests on your herbs, but sometimes you'll have the aphids. Some less common, mealybugs, scale, and thrips. Just get out there regularly. Just be watching your garden. And David Rodriguez, he's our county extension agent. And he's always saying, your best friend in your garden is your shadow. So get out into your garden regularly, look at things, get the problems before they become problems. Nip them in the bud. The same thing goes with weeds. Get them early and get them often. And one of my favorite tools is a stirrup hoe. Some people call it a hula hoe. Do you know what I'm talking about? It looks like a stirrup. It's a stirrup on a stick. And you just rub it on the ground. I should have brought one. And it just knocks off the roots. Under just about this, goes about in the soil about this much and cuts your plants, just severs them. Another thing that is really good for doing weeds is just to rake. Once a week, go over the surface with a rake. And you're like, well, I don't even see weeds. Do it anyway, even if you don't see weeds, because they're there. But a lot of times they've just started germinating. And if you just rake the area, so if you have a raised bed and you don't have mulch in it yet, rake the area. And you'll get those weeds that are trying to get started. If you do it once a week, you just will never have weeds, because it gets the babies before they get big. They're just barely germinating, but they're there. Disease, just practice good habits. If you have good spacing between your plants, don't overwater them. Don't keep the leaves wet, water where the roots are. And I really just don't have disease problems with herbs. I just, now that I've said that, the second I say something like that, then I get the problem. I was talking to a friend a while back, and she said, every time you say something, then that next year you get that challenge. And I told her that, and she said, well, that's so that you can tell people, because you're always doing these talks. She said, you've got to get all these problems so that you can learn about them, and then tell people how to fix them. I'm like, well, I don't want that problem. But good air circulation, drainage, and not keeping your plants wet will help with that. So growing them in a pot, you can grow herbs inside. Isn't that cute? I don't really grow a lot of herbs inside. I have 6 sons, and I also teach piano lessons. And so now we're empty nesters now. We're kind of recently empty nesters. But for many, many years, I had a lot of children in my house, all the time. So if they weren't my children, they were the neighborhood children, or they were my piano students, or the siblings of my piano students. So I gave up on growing plants in the house, because there was always some little toddler that was very willing to go dig in that soil and knock it all over the floor and everything, so I just got out of the habit of trying to grow in the house. So I grow pots outside. One of these days, maybe I'll bring them into the house, but I gotta de-junk first. We just have too much stuff. I don't have room for pots. But provide them the same care as you would with house plants. And the biggest thing there is avoid overwatering. Avoid overwatering. That's probably the biggest killer of house plants. It is nice. My daughter-in-law buys every now and then. Where she lives, they have herbs that they sell in the grocery store in a pot. And it usually, she buys basil. And there's usually 4 or 5 basil plants in that pot. And she never gets around to repotting them or dividing them or anything. But she uses them and they last for about a month or 2. And then, you know, by that time they're done and they pretty much die. But, you know, if you want them to live longer, repot them. Put them in a pot that's big enough for them. Get good quality potting soil. Don't go dig something out of your yard and put it in a pot. Get potting soil. You want something that is a soil-less mix. So potting soil is maybe a misnomer. You want something light that will drain well. And usually they have perlite in them, and that's because it drains really well. Pre-moisten the soil. If you don't pre-moisten the soil, what happens?
It doesn't get wet all the way through. It doesn't get wet all the way through when you water it.
Yeah, it doesn't get wet all the way through, and the water just runs off the top of the container. And it's best if you actually get hands-on with that and manually get the water, get the potting mix to absorb the water. And I have found that actually manipulating it, working it into it works best. So get your hands dirty and get the soil moist before you put it in your container. About 1 inch below the rim. Oftentimes when you're doing a container, you put your soil in, it's pre-moistened, and then the first time you water it, what happens? It kind of sinks. And a lot of times you have to top it off. Okay? And that's just normal. Sow the seeds on the surface if they're very, very small. If you're planting a plant, look for if it's root bound. And if it's very root bound, then gently kind of massage those roots, get them a little bit loosened. And that will stimulate their growth. If you've got bigger seeds, then go ahead and cover the seeds a little bit. So if I was growing something, maybe coriander, cilantro, I might cover the seeds just a little bit if I was growing them in a pot. Since they grow like weeds everywhere, I don't grow them in pots. But also water by misting when you first plant your seeds. After you get a bigger plant, you can bottom water them. So just stick the container in a container of water, let it absorb the water from the bottom. It'll get down to where the roots are. Take it out, let it drain well, and then put it back in whatever happy place it is in. Check them regularly. They can dry out really quickly, but avoid overwatering. Avoid overwatering. No standing water. If you have a saucer, a lot of times you'll water and then that saucer will fill up with water. Go dump the saucer. Don't leave the water in that saucer. Don't leave it sitting in the standing water. Your finger is really good, or you can get fancy and scientific and get one of those little water tester things, water meter things. But your finger is great. And I think I like to go down, go to a knuckle. And if it's dry on top, but just down below it's still moist, you're probably good for a little longer. It's kind of nice as far as you know how I said if your saucer fills up with water, dump the water? Dump it on something else. Because you got fertilizer in there. Don't just throw your fertilizer away. Dump it on another plant. Well, actually, dump it on the soil around another plant. Don't dump it on the plant. Because there will be leaching of nutrients. And so you'll have nutrients in that water. A water-soluble fertilizer is convenient. It's really convenient. And like I said, it'll go on through a little bit, but then dump it on something. Harvesting. Harvest the leaves in the morning when they're not all, these days, even my basil that's still doing its thing and surviving all this heat, in the afternoon it's looking pretty sad. Okay? So harvest in the morning, you'll get the best flavor. And then dry. Don't dry in the oven with it heat. Just bunch them and hang them up. If you dry them in the oven, they seem to lose more of their flavor. And it's hard to get the oven to be not too hot. Even if you just get it to warm. It's hard to do it in an oven. It can be done, but I've noticed when I've done it in the oven and done that, it doesn't have as much flavor. The flavor kind of gets lost. One thing I don't dry is cilantro. It just seems, it's just not the same. And I had a friend that had a dehydrator. She came and she harvested a bunch of my cilantro first thing in the morning and everything. And she took it home and she put it in a dehydrator, dried it, just did everything like you're supposed to do it. And she brought me some back and like, it just does not taste the same. Fresh cilantro just is so different than dried. And you will notice a difference in flavor.
My question is about cilantro, because do you have it all year round, Brenda?
No. But I was going to experiment with that this year. And I'll talk to you about cilantro here in a minute, because I love talking about cilantro. And I will talk a lot about cilantro, because it's one of my favorite things to grow. A major leaf harvest, you can cut off at the ground. Perennials cut third size because you want them to come back. So as the weather's getting colder, I'll be wanting to harvest my basil. Okay? Because when I know that a cold front is coming and we're going to get a freeze or whatever, then my basil's going to be toast. And I'll go out there and I'll harvest it and I'll dry it and I'll use it. You can also harvest flowers. And I think it's, what do they call that? The herbes de Provence that has they put lavender in it. And so the flowers are edible too. Drying the herbs, in loose bundles, you don't want to have them, you want air space between them, so not a big huge bunch, okay? It's a little harder, I think, drying herbs here. When I was a kid, I was growing up in Western Colorado. Western Colorado has like 2% humidity. We used to dry apricots. We had screens. We would just get screens. We'd cut the fruit and we'd put it on the screens and just leave it outside for a couple of days. And we had dried apricots. I got spoiled. So it's better here to do it in the house where you've got climate control, where you've got your air conditioner on, because that reduces the humidity. If you're trying to do it in your garage or whatever, you're going to have humidity in there, and they may not dry quite as well. Storage, they must be dry. So after they're dried all the way, make sure they're dried all the way, then put them in an airtight container, cool, dry. If they're not dried all the way, you'll get mold. They'll get mildewing, and great for the compost pile then. Another way that you can do that's not in this presentation is that you can do herbs in like olive oil, or you can do them in ice cube trays. And I've done that before. I've done these are dedicated ice cube trays for herbs because you don't want to use them for your lemonade after that. But you can just put them in the blender or the food processor with some oil or whatever, or just chop them up. Better if you chop them up, but sometimes if you have a bunch, that might be a little time consuming. And then you put them in the ice cube tray. So you don't get all the way hard, but you can cover them. And then when you need to use them, they're there to use. That's another way to store them. If you don't want to dry them. Okay, now let's talk about specific herbs. The fun part. This is what I like. I love basil. Basil has so many different kinds. Isn't that pretty? And you can grow these really, really well in your front flower bed because they're pretty. One thing that makes them stay prettier longer is if you cut the top. So you'll have a basil plant will come and it'll have what I call a main leader. Okay? And then you have these sprouts coming from the side a little bit, but if you cut that main top, it'll be bushier. You'll have a prettier plant if you make it bushier. And you just go down to where there are 2 sets of leaves coming out and you just cut it. And it will be perfectly fine and happy. As it starts to make flowers, you'll get all these flower shoots coming up. Then you have to make a decision. Do I cut them? Do I not? If you're having it in your front flower bed, you might want to cut them just so that the plant stays bushy and the leaves are nice and big and everything. I kind of don't tend to cut them because bees love them. Bees love the flowers. And so I tend to leave them. But sometimes if they're in my front flower bed, I might cut them and make them prettier. But I have gobs of basil in my backyard for bees, so I don't worry about that too much. They like it well drained, they like it warm or hot. They will not tolerate frost. And they are not even happy when it starts getting cold. But they will not tolerate frost. This is a superstar. And it's really, really pretty. Grace, who was going to give this presentation today, we just kind of hang out together sometimes. And she brought me some pesto. And she had made the pesto from that center purple part. And when she mixed it with the other pesto ingredients, it really was kind of reddish. So we have this red pesto. It was really pretty. And very tasty. It tastes really good. Okay, cilantro. Let's talk cilantro because I love it. Cool season. Which is so not fair because it does not grow at the same time as tomatoes. What's with that? I don't know. You can have tomato plants. You can grow your tomato plants in the fall, and you can protect them and keep them going and everything, and maybe get an overlap there. But the second it gets warm and the second the days get longer and there's more sunlight, it will bolt. It will make flowers and it will be done. So if you go to the garden centers, it really, really makes me mad that the stores sell it in March. You can go and you can buy a cilantro plant in March. And it's this little plant, it's this tall, whatever. And then it gets this tall. Did you see a difference there? There was a difference. It gets this tall. And then it makes a flower, a puny little flower. And then it goes to seed and it turns brown and it dies. And people go, I don't know what I do wrong. And you didn't do it wrong. The store did wrong in trying to sell you that at the wrong time. That's just dishonest. They plant the seed in the fall. So my seed that I have growing, my cilantro plants, they will just, when the weather is right for them, they will start doing their thing. And it's usually when we get a little bit of a cool front and we get rain. They are happier starting with rainwater. They seem to get going better. Here's a bed. I didn't plant those. I had cilantro growing there the year before, and when the fall rains came and the weather got a little bit cooler, they just started growing. So that's what they look like. The seeds generally have 2 seeds in them. It's a capsule that actually usually has 2 seeds, and usually when you see them starting to get going, you'll see 2 plants growing right next to each other. And that's because that seed dropped, the seed dropped 2 seeds. And so you'll get a whole bunch of them. And there's some cilantro that's blooming. They'll bloom in the spring when the weather gets warm, so they'll grow. They'll start growing. If we have good rains, they can start as early as September. You can start seeing little baby cilantro seedlings. And they really get with it in October usually. They really get with it if we have rains in October, you see those starting. If you know what the little seedlings look like, there's usually 2 kind of skinny leaves that will start growing. And okay. In this picture, you can see it maybe a little bit better. And there it is, blooming in the spring. Here's some at my house. It's starting to bolt. Do you see how it's gotten taller? It doesn't have flowers just yet, but it's starting to bolt. And that's what will happen when the weather gets warm. And if you've experienced that, you didn't goof up. That's just its natural life cycle. That's just what it does. When the weather gets warm, it bolts, and it makes flowers, and then it makes seeds. And that's its natural life cycle. And a lot of people say, I just can't grow it, I always screw it up. And it's like, no, you didn't screw it up. That's just how it grows.
I understand that, in that picture, if you go out there and cut those tops before they flower, that it gives you more time.
It gives you a few hours more. It might give you a little more time. But one thing that you might notice, when it starts bolting, the flavor changes.
Yes.
And I still like the flavor, but it is different. Once it starts bolting, even if you cut it, there is a different flavor there. It changes its flavor. The mints. There are so many mints. Mints are fun. There's orange mint, there's apple mint, there's lemon mint, there's lime mint, there's chocolate mint, there's peppermint, there's spearmint. So many different mints. So it's just fun. Since COVID, there haven't been as many varieties in the nurseries I've noticed, but I used to go to Gardner, and it's like, I want, there'd be like 20 different kinds. And I'm like, how much money do I have? But they're really fun to grow. They do tend to sprawl out and you want to grow everywhere. Our climate, they're not as invasive as in a more humid climate. When I was a kid, we always had spearmint right by the hose because there was a leak and the hose always dripped. And we always had spearmint there. They do like a bit more moisture. They're happier with more moisture. But they can be pretty aggressive. So if you're in a situation where they're going to get a lot of moisture, it tends to be aggressive, put them in a pot. And one thing you can do is put them in a pot and slightly submerge the pot in the soil if you don't like the look of the pot. But anywhere they touch the ground, they're going to root. And they're great for propagating. If you want to share with friends, they've rooted there. Just dig some up and share them with all your friends. They'll be happy to see you come. When I was on vacation in June, I had popped right by the front door. 2 weeks later, I came back and it was totally brown. Absolutely no life left in that thing. Didn't get watered once. And I finally this morning, I've been outside yesterday and today and just cutting things back that my perennials have gotten really tall. I'm cutting them back so that hopefully I can get another bloom this fall. And I finally just cut that quarter sad mint down. It smelled so wonderful. Even all brown and dried up and dead, it still smells amazing. So, catmint, it has beautiful blossoms. It's deer resistant. When it's blooming, it attracts the pollinators. Pineapple sage is another one. It really does smell like pineapple. How many of you have grown pineapple sage? It really does. It really does smell like pineapple. I like to add herbs like this to lemonade, like mint lemonade and pineapple lemonade. It just gives it a nice flavor. Mexican mint marigold is about to bloom. It would be about to bloom had a normal summer. It might take it another few weeks to get going and get to that bloom stage this year. It smells kind of like licorice. It has that kind of licorice kind of aroma and smell. I've used it before when I've done pickled beets because I thought it added a fun, different kind of flavor to it. Dill.
Wait, can I ask you a question? When you did it with the beets, did you use the flour?
No, I was using the leaves.
Okay.
Sorry, the leaves.
Okay.
Yeah, the flowers are for pretty. I haven't used the flowers. I suppose you could.
You can do it in tinctures, they're really good.
Okay. The next thing I want to start learning about is dyes and how I can use some of these in dyes. Dill, another one of my favorites. I always plant way more dill than I need. Why would I plant way more dill than I need? Butterflies. They're so fun. The black swallowtails. You can grab a bunch of the dill when you see the caterpillars. I've taken them inside. Of course, I have kids, you want to teach them things. So I would cut a bunch of dill for them and take them inside. And when they're ready to make their chrysalis, they will climb up the wall, go up by the ceiling, make their chrysalis, and then after a while, they come out of that chrysalis really quick. The swallowtails do. The monarchs take longer. And you can sit there and watch the monarchs all day long. They're real slow coming out of their chrysalis. The black swallowtails, it's like, okay, I'm out of here. And then they're flying around your house. And if you're not careful, you'll miss them. I gathered up a bunch one time and I took them to my son's classroom at school. And his teacher, they kept them and I was, he was taking dill to feed them regularly. And his teacher called me and she said, we missed it. We went out to recess. And they missed it when the butterflies were flying around in the classroom when they came back into recess. So they had a lot of fun. That's my husband's finger. He walked out the front door and he was just turning around to like shut the door or whatever and it just landed on his thumb. And he came back in the house, he said, look. I said, you have a very calm demeanor, they trust you. There's my ratty looking dill in my yard. And I just let it do that. It's just ratty looking. The black swallowtails come. Then it makes flowers, the bees come. They love it. And then it makes seed and then it just reseeds itself. So see how it's growing outside of the bed as well? I didn't plant that, it just grows. And it'll reseed and grow itself. Oregano, there's gobs and gobs of types of oregano.
So in the dill, I had it going good for 2 years, and then the last spring it came up, it molded. And I was just wondering, was it an odd spring, or, but it got a white fungus on it,
This year was a weird year because we had such a wet spring. The last couple of years have just been horrible. Just gardening, it's just been horrible. We started with that snowbit event, is what I call it. That summer we had a cooler and wetter than normal summer, but the following winter, the average temperatures were the coldest that I have seen. And what I mean by that is I've been here since '89. I've been in San Antonio since '89. I was having 2 to 3 freezes a week at my house for 3 months. I have never had that many freezes for that long a period of time. So we just had an overall colder winter that winter. And then it was followed by the hottest summer on record. And then we had this past winter, which was, it wasn't horrible. And then now we've had the hottest summer on record. So last year was a record heat-setting summer. This year beat it. So we've had 2 just horrible summers. I think a lot of things have just been stress and weather conditions. I didn't have great success with my dill this year. My dill was going really strong. It was just starting to get going. We had that really, really cold weather. I don't know if it was here, but it was 14 degrees at my house 2 days before Christmas. I was flying out of town. I was on a plane, and that temperature was dropping. I was like, I can't protect any. anything that's in my yard, I am on a plane, and that cold front is coming in right now. And so my deal really got put back from where it would have been. I didn't have a really good deal here either. And when I came back, I just had a lot of health problems for the first 4 months of the year. And so a lot of things just didn't happen for me this year. Oregano, so many different varieties. There's even one called Kent. I have a son named Kent, so I had to buy Kent oregano. Lots of different flavors on the oregano. You can have some that are more earthy and kind of, if you think about the kind of rosemary sage kind of flavors that go a little bit more that direction, and then you have more that are, some that are more spicy. And so smell them, taste them, and then decide how you want to cook with them. But there are so many different varieties, and so many different varieties of pine as well. There's a little hedge that's at the botanical garden, and they're just still being pretty. There are some that are not as trailing, that are a little more upright. So they're using a variety there that's a little more upright. Chimes, they're so cute. And they're just versatile too. I love them on my baked potato. I think we all do. I grow a lot of the alliums, the garlic and onions and the chives and things, a lot of times for repellents. So herbs with all their aromas can also repel things that you don't want in your garden. I like to intersperse herbs all throughout my garden in the hope that, and I'm experimenting with squash vine borders. It's like, how many things can I surround? If I put one squash plant here and surround it by 1,000 other things, and way over there put one more, will that work? So that's going to be my experiment this spring. Is what can I put around it?
I have actually heard that squash vine borders and other animals beds like that glow with black light.
Yeah.
So you go out at night with the black light, you find them.
Well, the thing is they lay the egg on the stem. I've actually gone out and hand-picked those eggs off the stem.
Wow.
Say that again?
I've actually gone, you can see the squash vine borders, you can see the eggs on the stem. They're tricky though. Those squash vine borders, when they're laying the eggs, they'll poke it down just below the soil. So those eggs can be on the stem below soil level. And so you have to scrape the soil away from the base of the plant. And if you do barriers, like if you're doing the foil, I like to get, you know when you give blood, and they put that elastic bandage? I bought a bunch of that. And you dig down below soil level, and you wrap the stem. And they'll lay their eggs on that bandage. And it does help. Eventually they catch on and, then they start laying their eggs further up but I don't, that way I'm less likely to lose the whole plant bar. I lose individual leaves at the stem. Hate squash vine borders.
On chives, when they bloom, what part do you eat of the
You eat the green part. I haven't tried to eat the bloom. The bloom's pretty, but I eat the green part.
So when you harvest,
They don't bloom really well if you're regularly harvesting. So I don't usually get to the bloom stage, and unless I just ignore them, but usually I'm using them. And so as long as you're continuing to cut, and you're not as likely to get a bloom. If you want the blooms, then leave them alone, don't cut them. Okay. Most of these things, I would assume the blooms would be, good to eat as well. Rosemary, the blooms on rosemary are they're not very significant. They're just little itty things. There is a barbecue skewers because it's very thick and woody. It's hard enough that you can put stuff on it and skewer it. Have skewers in your barbecue. That's why it's called that. Lavender, drainage, 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 drainage. And more drainage. It's better grown in a pot. because when we get these periods where we do get a lot of rain, if it's not in the pot, it's gonna die. Because and you know how that is, we have these periods, we'll be dry, and then all of a sudden we'll have 2 weeks where it rains every day. And that will kill them. So they're much better to pot. I was at a presentation one time and one person recommended if you want to put them in the ground, dig a deep hole, put rocks and gravel, and then some sand, and then plant your lavender and fill in around it with compost. And they said, dig your hole like 2 feet deep. and so I'm kind of, yeah, maybe a pot sounds like less work. And you can control the pot better. If it gets into the really rainy, then you can move your pot and up under the patio or somewhere where it's dry. We are at 1 o'clock, and I'm supposed to be officially done. So if you need to leave, you're welcome to leave. If you would like me to keep talking, I can keep doing that. But I won't get offended if you get up and leave because you need to be somewhere.
I was at some activity the other day, and I was talking to a woman that had a nice big garden, and she said she puts an herb or 2 under each plant she puts in her garden.
Yeah.
And she said that takes care of everything else. Herbs underneath it.
I'll show you a picture. So here's a picture. This, the one, okay.
Are you going to do the drawing?
Yes, we will.
I'll do the drawing.
Okay. Let's do the drawing right quick.
And then we'll grab a wood from there.
Then I want to talk to you.
Oh, I can pick. I'm not looking for 6641273.
1273.
One,
We
two,
have
seven,
last
Right
week.
after me. Yeah.
She's got,
I think that's 1273. Let's see. Oh, yes, that's it.
1273.
You won. It'll have finished its life cycle and it'll be ready to come out. And then that'll make room for the seeds. So you can intercrop like that. Down there on the ground in that same picture, let me see, right here, that's oregano. Now it's never going to get big, so I'm just going to leave it there and my tomatoes will grow. They'll be fine. And it'll kind of spread and it'll kind of cover the ground there. It'll have the aroma there, like she said, to deter the pests, so they can use them. But it also will shade the ground there. As it grows out, it'll shade the ground and kind of be a living mulch. And so your herbs that spread like that can also serve that purpose. And the other picture there, that's a whole bunch of cilantro that's going to seed. All those flowers, and it looks ratty-tatty. My garden I live next to a green belt. This is actually in the green belt. So it's like, nobody cares what it looks like. It doesn't look any worse than the rest of the green belt and all the weeds that are growing there. But I like it there because I will go out and I will hear the buzzing. I will hear the buzzing and just covered with bees. And I have a friend, there are some people who just genetically, cilantro tastes like soap too. Yes. Yeah, some people are like that, where it tastes like soap. My friend who has that came and visited me, and there's just the smell of cilantro everywhere. And she's like, I'm tasting soap just smelling your garden. And I had to remember, I don't offer her cilantro. And there's just more, that's kind of a big picture, but just all around in the garden. That's the thing at the front there is a Mexican oregano. And it's not a true oregano, but it can be used as an oregano replacement. It has a bit of a citrusy flavor, really good. And then I have my garden going, but you can see in the background, all kind of around. This was kind of early spring when I had a bunch of broccoli, cauliflower, brassicas, and cilantro
keep away other bugs? Is it cilantro that you find that's the best thing?
I don't know that it's the best for keeping away other bugs, but it's a really, really good thing to invite weeds into your garden. I tend to plant my brassicas with dill because that they seem to be happy together. There's not a lot of scientific evidence behind companion planting. And I think part of that is because who's going to fund the research? You know, you're not going to get a good, wonderful chemical, you know, that's going to make some company a whole lot of money from doing research on companion planting. So there's really not a whole lot of scientific evidence behind companion planting. But I like to do it because, you know, anecdotally it just seems that it works well. But we do know that monocultures are not generally as healthy as a diversified landscape. So we do know that has been, there's science behind it. And there were thyme, lemongrass, citronella, lemon balm. That's all we have left. And there, lemongrass, the mosquito repellent, I haven't really found it to be great at that, but a lot of people say it does. You can try it and see. Thyme, I love thyme. Thyme and oregano, some of the leafy ones that you're not really growing for flowers, they also do well in shade. They do pretty well in shade. And a lot of times you see when they talk about growing herbs, they say full sun. But a lot of them really can do really well in shade as well. Your mints do better in shade. Your thyme does, I think, a little bit better in shade than in our harsh sun. And I really do need to let you guys go because
I was going to ask you about parsley. Is there anything special about parsley that you can feel?
parsley, no, I was growing it out in full sun last year in my whiskey barrels. They want to show in the cold weather.
I got eaten up by the black swans or butterflies.
Yep, mine did too, and I was happy about that.
Yeah.
Because they come in when it's time, the plant is starting to bolt, and it's going to be gone anyway.
Okay, so she's coming in to bring her fall.
And in the fall, it likes the cold weather. And cilantro likes the cold weather, dill likes the cold weather, all those three will bolt. Fennel likes the colder weather. Those things will bolt. And they'll be done when the weather gets warmer and days are longer.
Again, when you lose the liquor, like that, do you weed through?
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It depends on what I want to do with that area. With my, I also do a lot of composting. So I compost my old plants, but if it doesn't have massive resistance, and I'm going to plant something that will grow from seed, then it might be good. But if I want to put a tomato plant there where I was growing out, then I'm going to it's in the way that I put it.
Any other questions for Karen before we close?
Oh, so you better find the lizard.
Did anybody find the lizard?
Yeah.